One more point about ionization energy, and then we'll do kind of a takeaway on this whole idea, is when we are forming ions, the electrons are always removed from the highest principal quantum number. So what that means is they're always going to go to that highest number. So this gets the conversation of, when we're filling them, we kind of think, okay, I go from 4s to 3d. And it's like, well, is that the way it should be lined up? Should I be removing the 3d electrons? And the answer is no. When we take a look at our periodic table again, we always remove the highest principal quantum number. So for example, say you're in row 4, and you might naturally think, well, if I'm moving along, I would remove these electrons before I move these. No, because these guys are in principal quantum number 4, these are in 3, and these are in 4. So this helps us understand, explain why we always lose what's called the valence electrons, which is these 6 and then these 2. But the D block electrons are not the ones that are lost when forming ions. So it's always going to be the S block and the P block going across. Okay. The other thing just to kind of take a look at is this, looking at this ionization energy and the numbers we talked about, looking at this trend, and we looked at the chart before. This also helps us understand why these elements typically are the ones that will lose electrons, and these elements are the ones that typically gain electrons. And you get a simple question. Why is it that these three typically lose and these three typically gain? And that's a generalization. These guys will typically lose electrons because of their low ZEF, the low effective nuclear charge. Now, remember, it still is required. You still need to use energy to remove these electrons. It's just relatively easy. These guys, it becomes very difficult because of the ZEF. They are held in very tightly because of the effective nuclear charge, so they're not easily removed. So that's why these gain and these typically lose. It's a little more dynamic than that, but we can stick with that for now. All right, next topic. Slide this up a little bit. Electron affinity. And this is a little different. It is the energy. Key difference between this and the previous ionization, change. The energy change that occurs when an electron is added to a specifically gaseous atom. Now, in general, most atoms release energy. So they become more stable when they have gained an electron. So they release energy, an exothermic process. But some noble gases have a positive value. In other words, they don't take them easily, as does other elements just like nitrogen. So let's take a look at another chart and see if we can grab this. All right, so here's looking at electron affinity. If we're moving across from, say, for example, we'll go lithium, beryllium. So if we look at these, okay, the energy change. So adding an electron to this is going to release energy. So energy is going to be released in this process, kind of like we just said. So most atoms release energy. So it takes that electron, it absorbs it because, again, the nucleus is positive, electrons are negative. So in doing so, it becomes more stable. But look at beryllium. It's not something that creates stability. And the question is why? Positive, negatives attract, right? Well, where is beryllium going to put that extra electron? The S sublevel is already full. So it has to elevate it from the 2s up to the 2p, which is a higher energy level. It's not held there easily, so it's easily lost. So it is not something which is stable. It's not going to take it very easily. It's going to lose it again pretty easily. But as far as continuing along in the trend, boron becomes stable again. It's, again, positive, negative attraction. So it is going to become easier, more stable, negative value indicates stability. Carbon continues that, but then nitrogen, again, is positive. Why is it positive? Not stable. Where is nitrogen going to put that extra electron? So think of those sublevels, which I showed in a diagram before. I'll do it again here once we bounce over. Up to this stage, one electron, think of these as the boxes with two electrons. Two electrons, excuse me, one electron, one electron, one electron. Nitrogen's got an electron here, so it has to put that extra electron in one of those three boxes, so slightly not stable. So therefore, when it comes to time to take an electron away, you have repulsion if these are the three boxes. You have repulsion, it's going to release that electron relatively easily. So it's not easy to shove that extra electron into a third or one of the occupied boxes. It's not easy. But then again, when you look at fluorine, fluorine has high Zeph. It's at the end of the row with the exception of noble gases. So it's already got all the protons up to that point that at the end of the row, and those electrons are going to be held, attracted more easily because of the relatively high Zeph, number of protons for that shell. But then over here, it's like, well, why doesn't this one also have a very negative value? Where's neon going to put the electron? It has to go to a higher energy level, a whole nother level. So all of these behave in the same way. Yeah, let's see what we got over here. Yeah, I'll come back to that later. All right, so bounce back over to here. All right, other trends we can take a look at. And then eventually we'll swing over and do some homework problems, but let's knock some notes out first. Metals. So looking at metallic character. Metals in general are shiny. They are ductile. Means you can pound the metals into thin sheets. They are good conductors. And when they react with oxygen, they form these metal oxides. And those metal oxides are considered or classified as ionic solids. And when dissolved in solution, they are basic. They form basic solutions. So let's talk about these a little bit. I mean, this part we're probably fine with. Metals are shiny, they're ductile, they're good conductors. But when you mix a metal with oxygen, or just they are, so for example, we'll just say calcium oxide. That's a metal oxide. They're considered ionic. And the reason they're considered ionic is because they're on opposite sides of the periodic table. Anytime you have a metal and a non-metal, and they react together, it's going to be ionic. Okay, fine with that. When they're dissolved in water solution, they are basic solutions. So I will show an equation for that. Let's go ahead and do that now. We'll do a different one than this, something that's a little more familiar. Sodium oxide. That is a metal oxide. If you mix with water and you try to predict what the outcomes will be, let's see. This thing's going to split. And sodium, being a group 1, is always going to be by itself. And then what do you have left over? Oxygen and this, water. So what do we think that's going to make together? So it's not going to form like peroxide. That's not very stable. But what it will do is it's going to form 2 hydroxides, which are basic. That is a base. So that's what you're going to get out of this metal oxide. Now, some of these aren't necessarily always soluble. Therefore, well, we'll get there. Insoluble metal oxides. So what would I do if I wanted to dissolve a metal oxide that won't dissolve? So insoluble metal oxides will dissolve in, take a guess, acids. It will dissolve in acids. And the example we'll put together here is nickel oxide, solid, plus nitric acid. Pretty nasty stuff. And our outcome will be nickel nitrate and water. So again, this is a metal oxide, which typically, if you think about it, is something that forms a base. So when you mix a base with an acid, you end up with what's called a salt in water. It's like a neutralization. So we can get it to dissolve. Here it is. This is aqueous. And it's in water. So there we go. So insoluble metal oxides will dissolve in acids. It's a neutralization type reaction. That's a good place to take a break.